Hi, guys, welcome back. This book I'm going to share with you today is called Funny Bones, and it's about an artist named Jose Guadalupe Posada. You might recognize some of the artwork in this book from the Festival of Bones book that I just read to you. Okay, so bear with me. Here we go. All right. Funny Bones, Posada and his Day of the Dead Calaveras. Skeletons riding bicycles, skeletons wearing fancy hats, skeletons dancing and strumming on guitars. We call these festive bony figures calaveras. In Spanish, the word calavera means skull. A lot of things that are associated with skulls and with El Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, are called calaveras. For example, there are calavera drawings, candy calaveras, calavera poems, and calavera toys. The skeleton figures are not scary. In fact, they look as if they're having fun. They are the creation of Jose Guadalupe Posada, and this is his story. You might see some familiar faces. In 1852, in a small house in the Mexican city of Aguascalientes, Jose Guadalupe Posada was born. Lupe, as everyone called him, was the son of a baker and the sixth of 8 children. Lupe's older brother Cirilo became a teacher. He taught Lupe how to read and write. Lupe loved to copy the drawings he saw in prints and in books at school. Cirilo noticed how well Lupe drew and helped him enroll at the local art academy. Oh, and you might have noticed that this illustrator has a very distinctive style when drawing people. That's just the way he does it. And every artist has their own style, so this is his. And our illustrator is named, let's see, now I have to find this. I think it's Duncan. Yes, Duncan Tonatia. And I probably said that wrong. I'm sorry, Mr. Duncan. Okay, back to the story. When Lupe was 18 years old, he began to work at Don Trinidad Pedrosa's print shop. There he discovered his lifelong passion for printing. He learned lithography. Lupe also learned engraving. He helped Don Trinidad print documents, diplomas, flyers, labels for matchbooks, receipts, and invitations for weddings and birthdays. So these 2 pages show you all the different steps. Okay, so lithography. Using a grease pencil, draw on a special flat limestone. Apply chemicals and moisten the stone with water. Cover the stone with an oil-based ink. The ink will adhere only to the drawing because water and oil don't mix. Oops, let me show that better. There we go. And number 4, use a press to print the image on a piece of paper. Repeat as many times as you wish. Okay, and then in engraving, draw on a piece of wood or a metal plate. Okay. Step 2, use a cutting tool called a burin to carve around the drawing. This will cause the drawing to be raised above the rest of the plate. Step 3, cover the drawing with ink. The ink will adhere only to the parts that are in relief, that is, raised. And step 4, use a press to print the image on a piece of paper. Repeat as many times as you wish. Okay. After work, Lupe, Don Trinidad, and other artisans would gather at the shop. They were unhappy with the job that the people in the government were doing. Don Trinidad invited Lupe to make some drawings for a small newspaper he was involved with. It was called El Jicote, the Bumblebee. Lupe drew cartoons for the paper. This was long before he drew calaveras. In one of his drawings, Lupe drew some local politicians climbing a pole and stepping over one another. By making the men look silly, he showed their greed and other bad traits. Readers of El Jicote agreed with Lupe's point of view and laughed when they saw his cartoons. That year, some of the politicians Lupe and Don Trinidad were against lost the elections. But some remained in power and were angry at them. To avoid trouble, Lupe and Don Trinidad decided to move to the nearby city of León. There we go. I'm still getting used to this. So you can see here the picture of the politicians stepping over each other as they're climbing up the pole. The people laughing at it. Lupe lived in León for many years. He opened his own print shop, and everyone began to call him Don Lupe as a sign of respect. He married Maria de Jesus Vela, and eventually they had a son. They named him Juan Sabino. In addition to his printing work, Don Lupe began to create illustrations for books and pamphlets. He also taught lithography at a local school. He became successful and well known in the region. But in 1888, a terrible flood destroyed a large part of the city, including Don Lupe's shop. So you can see him with his wife and their baby Juan, and then the water rising and destroying the shop. Don Lupe, his wife, and their son moved to Mexico City, the capital of the country. Don Lupe worked as an illustrator and a designer in several print shops. Eventually, he was able to open his own shop near the Zócalo, the city's main square. One of the men Don Lupe worked with was Antonio Vanegas. He published intriguing stories on large sheets of bright paper called broadsides. The tales were about a wide range of topics, including scary creatures, fires, miracles, violent crimes, heroes, bandits, cockfights, and bullfighters. Don Lupe illustrated many of these tales. Paper boys sold the inexpensive broadsides on the streets for a few cents, and people, even people who couldn't read, bought them. They were fascinated by Don Lupe's drawings. So here's one, and it says El Valiente. Don Lupe and Don Antonio worked together for more than 20 years. They were always busy, especially every November 1st through 2nd during the Dia de los Muertos celebrations. On those days, the city was full of vendors who sold pan de muerto, bread, cempasúchil, marigold flowers, alfeñiques, sugar skulls, and papel picado, paper cutouts. People bought these and other items to decorate the ofrendas, offerings they made for their loved ones who had died. For the holiday, Don Antonio and other editors published literary calaveras. They were short rhyming poems that featured a skeleton and made jokes about him or her. People found the poems very funny and bought them on the street from paper boys. A man named Manuel Mania illustrated many of these poems for Don Antonio. Don Lupe also began to illustrate them, and soon he became a master at it. All right. Now I'm going to read this poem here. I'm going to try and do it upside down. Okay. Calavera love. Okay, maybe not upside down. It was a warm afternoon in the middle of May. Mr. Bones grabbed his hat and went walking that day. When he noticed a beauty on the opposite street, he ran towards her and kneeled at her feet. "You are the prettiest girl I've seen in my life. Please marry me. Please be my wife." "I am sorry, senor, but that cannot be. You're handsome and all, but too skinny for me." All right. Don Lupe had a lot of work. He was busy all the time. He began using a printing technique that was quicker than lithography or engraving. It was called etching. Okay, now we're going to look at those steps. Step 1, etching. Using a pen and acid-resistant ink, draw on a metal plate. Step 2, dip the plate in acid. The acid will make the top layer disintegrate, leaving just the drawing. Step 3, cover the plate with ink. The ink will adhere only to the parts that are in relief raised. And step 4, use a press to print the image on a piece of paper. Okay. Don Lupe made thousands of drawings over the years. Only 100 or so are of calaveras, but they are now his most famous images. Whether he made an etching, a lithograph, or an engraving, he had to draw the image in reverse, the opposite of the way he wanted the finished image to appear. Otherwise, when the image was transferred by ink to paper, it would be backwards. The inspiration behind some of Don Lupe's calaveras is clear, but for others it is not. We can try to interpret what they mean. So here's that page. So notice they are flip-flopped of each other. So he did this backwards, and then when it printed forwards. Same goes with words. Got to do them backwards too. During El Dia de los Muertos, Don Lupe surely watched people going to the cemetery. They weeded and repainted the gravestones of their loved ones. They brought food and told stories about them. Sometimes they hired musicians to play their loved ones' favorite songs. Okay. So there they are at the cemetery. All right, now we're going to read this poem. Don Lupe drew some skeletons dancing and partying. Was he saying that El Dia de los Muertos is not only a celebration of death, but also a celebration of life? A day when the dead become alive, and not in the creepy way, the fun way. Sorry, that wasn't a poem. Okay. One day, Don Lupe drew a skeleton wearing a flamboyant hat, La Catrina. The drawing was printed alongside a Calavera poem about the type of woman who puts on makeup and fancy clothes and acts as if she's better than everyone else. Can you imagine the woman who inspired that drawing? Perhaps she wore a pretentious outfit and strolled through the park on a Sunday afternoon. She thought very highly of herself, but acted mean and ignored others when they needed help. Ooh. Okay, so here's those 2 pages. Was Don Lupe saying that no matter how fancy your clothes are on the outside, on the inside we are all the same? We are all calaveras? I think so. See, there she is. We saw her in the other book too. Don Lupe saw his country, and especially Mexico City, change dramatically during his lifetime. When he was a boy, people walked or rode on horses or in carriages. Now he saw people riding on bicycles. He saw streetcars travel on tracks through the city. Everyone seemed to be going faster and faster. Don Lupe drew some wild skeletons racing and trampling one another. Was he saying that we can try to go faster, but one day we will all reach the same finish line and become calaveras? How very deep. In 1910, when Don Lupe was 58 years old, a terrible conflict began. Today, it is referred to as the Mexican Revolution. Thousands of farmers and workers throughout Mexico were angry because they worked very hard but could barely earn enough money for their families to live on. The laborers grabbed rifles, machetes, sticks, and any weapons they could find to fight the government and the wealthy landlords it protected. But the rebellious groups that formed in different parts of the country did not work together. They began to fight not only the government, but one another as well, and things spun out of control. Thousands of people lost their lives. Okay. Excuse me. All right. Most of Don Lupe's calaveras are festive and fun, but the ones he drew about La Revolucion are aggressive and frightening. Was Don Lupe saying that sometimes calaveras are not a laughing matter? Don Lupe drew some of the leaders who were involved in La Revolucion, like Emiliano Zapata and Francisco I. Madero. His calaveras were a way to criticize those men and express his own views. He would praise them if he agreed with their decisions and actions, but he would ridicule them if he disagreed with them, just as he had poked fun at the politicians in Aguascalientes when he was a young man. So here's our 2, Emiliano Zapata and Francisco I. Madero. And then here was Don Lupe saying that even powerful leaders one day become calaveras. And again, Emiliano Zapata, Francisco I. Madero. Don Lupe drew calaveras of famous men, but he also drew calaveras of the people around him, like the men who swept the streets and the people who worked at print shops. He even drew a calavera of his friend Don Antonio. Okay. Was Don Lupe saying that calaveras are all around us, that we are all calaveras, whether we are rich or poor, famous or not? Don Lupe died on January 20th, 1913. Many people were familiar with his drawings and his calaveras, but very few people knew the artist who was behind them. It was years after his death that historians and artists such as John Charlot and Diego Rivera began to wonder who had drawn such wonderful images. Today, Jose Guadalupe Posada is not called Don Lupe anymore. He is simply called Posada, which is the way he signed his work. His art is celebrated in Mexico, in the United States, and around the world. Some people even dress like Catrinas and parade on the streets during El Dia de los Muertos. And on that special day, there is always somewhere an altar with an ofrenda to remember the great Don Lupe Posada. You might also recognize some of these styles and figures and images as from the movie, I just forgot the name of it, Coco. What would Posada's calaveras look like nowadays? They look like they're having fun, don't they? I sure hope some of you guys are doing some of these things while you're staying at home, having a little bit of fun, playing outside, and of course, washing your hands. Really important to sing the alphabet song while you're washing your hands so you get all the germs off with lots of soap, okay? All right, I hope you enjoyed this book, and I will see you for the next one. Thank you.